On the phone, it's a pleasure to welcome back to the show, the second time in a couple of weeks, Matt Duss. He is a policy analyst from the Center for American Progress. Matt, welcome back to the show.
Thanks a lot. Glad to be here.
Obviously, we have we're on the eve of a meeting of the General Assembly. There's a lot of speculation that perhaps President Obama will meet with Iranian President Hassan Rouhani. I covered Rouhani's comments a little bit at the end of last week, but just walk us up to where we're at and why the comments that Rouhani made last week were different, at the very least in tone, if not in substance, and the implications of it.
Right. Okay. Well, in June, Iran had its presidential election. I think your listeners may remember that in June 2009, 4 years before, there was a presidential election that led to mass demonstrations, the largest seen in Iran in many years, because many believed, and I think evidence indicates that that election was an unfair one, that the votes were not counted correctly, and that the candidate that many people thought would win, Mir Hossein Mousavi, who was a pro-reform candidate, he had the election stolen from him for Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, the very inflammatory president who went on to serve a second term. This time, however, the candidate who won, Hassan Rouhani, he's a regime cleric, very close. He's a regime insider. He's not a reformer in the same way that many believed Mousavi was, but he was still the most moderate available candidate.
Matt, let me stop. Let me
Sure.
stop you right here. And I've heard many people echo the same sentiments about the election, the second election of Ahmadinejad. When we talk about that election being unfair, that there was some questions as to the outcome, simultaneously we know that Ahmadinejad did not necessarily have the greatest of relationships with the supreme leader. That's my understanding. Correct me, please, if I'm wrong. But so who would be responsible for having for any hijinks that took place during that election?
Well, I think the circle around the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, if the election were fixed, and again, it's hard to say definitively, but I think the evidence is that it was. But it's important to note here that that relationship between Ahmadinejad and Khamenei, deteriorated very quickly after the election. I mean, They were very close. Khamenei was seen as a key sponsor of Ahmadinejad, but basically Ahmadinejad, having won re-election, very quickly got too big for his britches and started to install his own followers and kind of try to make changes without the juice to do that, and he created a lot of enemies and he empowered a lot of people who hated him anyway. So Khamenei, within a few months of that re-election, kind of decided, okay, this guy is just too much trouble, and signaled in various ways that he was no longer going to support Ahmadinejad, and the sharks began to circle, and eventually he was taken down, and he will now go on to do whatever he does in the future. It's hard to say how relevant he will be. Maybe he'll get his own show like Sarah Palin. I don't know. But so now
they could maybe do a show together, and that would be amazing. I would watch that.
I think that would be the greatest idea for Crossfire that I think anyone has ever. Anyway, you go to this past June, and you had there were several candidates who were seen as being preferred by Khamenei, but Rouhani was seen as the most moderate candidate. He's someone who ran on a platform of rapprochement with the international community, saying we need to improve our relations because the economic situation in Iran as a result of international sanctions on Iran has had some very, very damaging effects, and so his promise was, I'm going to work with the international community to do away with some of these sanctions and improve our situation and sort of re-engage and reintegrate Iran into the international system. And so that's what he's been, his rhetoric since winning has been toward that. He's taken a number of significant steps, made a number of significant statements. The people he staffed his administration with, particularly the new foreign minister, Zarif, is known and trusted among Western diplomats as a serious and pragmatic man. And importantly, as I noted in my piece last week, it's one thing to have an Iranian president who says these sorts of things, as we can refer back to Mohammad Khatami, who was the president in the late 90s, but it's another thing to look at the supreme leader and what the supreme leader is saying. Khamenei, as the supreme leader, the way the Iranian system is arranged, he is the final decision maker. He is the one who has the most power in the system of government in the Islamic Republic of Iran. So for him to be supporting Rouhani's outreach, as he has done, saying the things that he is saying in a speech to Iran's Revolutionary Guards Corps, a very powerful military organization, last week, he said, listen, we need to show, quote, a heroic flexibility towards some of these political decisions. I think is a very, clearly, you can clearly interpret that as saying, we need to create the political space here to allow Rouhani to do what he needs to do. He was a sort of warning to some of the more hardline elements in the Iranian system, saying, back off, give Rouhani some space to run.
And the fact that he made those statements about flexibility to what is arguably the largest cross-section of power and, I guess, sort of anti-Western and conservative in the context of Iranian politics, right. That's extremely relevant, right? I mean, he's going into the source of, if there's any pushback to these initiatives, it's going to come from there.
Exactly. So he was essentially saying to Iran's own hardliners and anti-Western hawks, like, listen, everybody just calm down. I'm supporting what Rouhani is doing, and it was a very important signal.
And so, and this is also, I think, contextually speaking, in terms of understanding the Khamenei's, I guess, incentives here and agenda. Iran is dealing with some severe economic problems.
Mm-hmm. Right. The inflation in Iran is skyrocketing. Various goods and imports have been stopped. Iran has been cut off from the international banking system. Various measures that have been taken by a cooperation of of countries and international organizations has been significant. The damage is really being felt. And so I think it's a combination of two things. One, you had President Obama's outreach when he came into office, making clear to the people of Iran and the government of Iran that the United States does not seek regime change. I mean, this is a suspicion, bordering and sometimes crossing that border into outright paranoia on the part of a lot of Iran's leaders, including the supreme leader, that whatever the United States might say, the goal of the United States has always been the destruction of the Islamic Republic. So saying what President Obama did, but then offering to negotiate and coming to the table, but once we got to the table and Iran was not willing to deal in a way that the U.S. and its international partners saw as being forthright, then turned to the sanctions and pressure track, and he has been able. He's been able to forge a very, very effective and strong multilateral coalition to enforce these sanctions.
I mean, in some respects, that that I guess posture by President Obama has been an incredibly successful foreign policy, policy.
I agree. I think it's something that is it's under-recognized here. I think you had a lot of our own hardliners here in the United States who have always scoffed and been skeptical at the value of kind of public diplomacy and outreach and saying these kinds of things to Iran. But I think a lot of people have recognized that it was precisely that outreach, that demonstration of good faith, that played a very important role and acted as a force multiplier for the pressure efforts that were then undertaken.
And just tease that out. When you say force multiplier, what you're talking about is President Obama essentially calling their bluff, brought other players to the table who would create a united front.
Right, exactly. By taking every effort to show that it was not the United States who was the recalcitrant party, by saying we are willing to come to the table to talk about all issues. We will talk bilaterally. We will talk about whatever you want to talk about. But obviously the nuclear program is still the most immediate challenge and concern. By demonstrating that willingness to talk, they put the Iranian regime on its back foot. because the claims that the Iranian hawks had always made were like, the U.S. isn't interested in talking to us, they just want to destroy us. So it demonstrated something very important to Iranians domestically, but it also demonstrated something to the rest of the world.
And I have to say that I think for the most part, our machismo, I've recovered from a lot of this. I know how embarrassing it is to have a president come up and sound almost like he's apologetic, like he's going to negotiate. But I feel like that may be easier for me because I'm sort of metrosexually. But all right. So leaving that aside, is one of the other factors that is driving and we don't know how sincere yet. That's the issue that we're going to get to. But
right.
Driving this impetus, at least to put on, even if the most cynical of us, this show. How much? I mean, knowing that much of what happened in the Arab Spring was a function, at least in the beginning, of economic issues.
Right.
How much concern is there in Iran that their economic pressures could be similarly destabilizing for their internal regime?
Oh, I think there's a great deal of concern. I think part of what led to the 2009 demonstrations was a similar sort of thing. It was not only that Mousavi, that Mir Hossein Mousavi was promising an attempted rapprochement with the international community. He was recognizing a lot of the same problems that Rouhani is now recognizing, even though they have gotten much worse in the intervening 4 years: the lack of economic development, the lack of opportunity. The chance for a brighter future. So economic factors were one of those things that drove that, because they felt that many young Iranians especially felt that they were being denied those opportunities when they saw it, Mousavi's victory was stolen from them. So the supreme leader, I think the fact that even though Rouhani was not seen as being his preferred candidate, he understood that it was in his interests, now that Rouhani has actually won, that the system just simply couldn't bear another uprising like that. There's a certain extent to which the supreme leader is very concerned about, the legitimacy of the system. And even in authoritarian systems like the Islamic Republic, the public opinion and a sense of the correctness and legitimacy of the system is still important, even, if it's to a lesser extent than in a real democracy. But it's still a factor that plays.
And we have the last 2 years, I mean, I think as evidence of that. Rouhani gets in, and he you mentioned that he appointed Zarif, his foreign minister, and Zarif also now importantly has the portfolio, I guess the nuclear negotiations portfolio. What are the implications of that?
Right, but before a couple months ago, the nuclear negotiations portfolio was handed by the National Security Council of Iran, which meant it was essentially a military-dominated portfolio. Moving it to the civilian foreign ministry, is both, is a sign just that we're moving out of the hands of the military, but also putting it under much greater control of Rouhani and his appointed foreign minister, Mohammad Javad Zarif. So I think it's important just because you're moving it out of the hands of the military, but it's also important because it's yet another sign of support from the supreme leader to Rouhani. It simply would not have happened had Khamenei not signed off on it.
Now, much of at least the sort of the awareness of what's happening was a function of Rouhani's interview with NBC last week, where he reiterated Iran's determination not to have a military program when it comes to nukes. So this isn't necessarily new, is it? But have we ever heard it so explicitly articulated?
Not for a while from an Iranian president. I mean, given that we've had Ahmadinejad for the last 8 years. But it is something that Iranian leaders have said repeatedly. since their nuclear program was revealed in 2002. But I think it's notable just for the venue in which it was said, an interview with a Western journalist. But yeah, it's not new. I think the real notable thing from that, as I noted, was the fact that Rouhani said very confidently, "I have the backing to make a deal." I think that is the real news here. That as Iran analyst Houman Majd, who's very, very intimately familiar with the details of Iranian politics, he said the Iranian leadership is in sync right now in a way he has not ever seen.
And so is this, how much of this is a function of what has taken place, what is happening in Syria in terms of their civil war, but what is also what has taken place in terms of what now appears to be the averting of our involvement, the United States involvement in the Syrian conflict, and perhaps if not in practice, at least in theory, some type of chemical weapons new regime imposed upon Syria. How does that play into the timing of this? Is it simply coincidental? Is somebody seizing on an opportunity? What's the interplay there?
Well, I think with regard to Syria, it's somewhat coincidental, although I think the fact that President Obama was willing, after having sort of sat on the sidelines, although that's not entirely a fair, summary of the policy, but just seeing that President Obama was willing to get involved and do what he would, go to the mat for strikes over the question of WMD chemical weapons, I think sent an important message to the Iranians. But also, I think some have suggested that what's happening in Syria, this civil war, is to Iran's benefit, and I just don't think that's true at all. I think you've got a situation where it's not exactly like Vietnam. In many ways, it's similar. You've got Syria, who's the most important ally in the Arab world for the Iranians. They're involved in backing him. They've got advisors there. They've got fighters there. They are just engaged in that conflict in a way which I think is steadily causing greater harm and discouragement for them. So the possibility that they could now use the Syria situation as another front on which to possibly come to some sort of working relationship with the United States is a positive thing for them.
And I mean, so the message that President Obama sent by suggesting that he was prepared to attack Syria was what? I mean, how is that received? That this guy is just serious? But I mean, what exactly did they? How did they respond to the fact that he slow walked it enough that a deal developed, if not orchestrated a deal?
It's really hard to say. I mean, I think there are plausible arguments both ways about how they interpret it. I think one of the interesting things about the Syria debate that's happened over the last month is how difficult it is to actually determine what various adversaries have, how they've interpreted various decisions and non-decisions. Mm-hmm. But I think just the extent to which the Syria debate here in the U.S. underlined this administration's concern with the question of chemical weapons and the broader WMD question, sent them an important message.
And so, what is it that we want? I mean, let's in John McCain's worst nightmare, President Obama sits down with Rouhani this week, and they come out with a document that starts to head into a direction. What would that look like from the perspective of U.S. security interests?
Well, first of all, the main thing is that we need Iran to receive a clean bill of health from the International Atomic Energy Agency. The IAEA has a set of questions relating to possible military applications of Iran's nuclear work that Iran has yet to answer sufficiently. So getting the IAEA sign-off that Iran has produced evidence or answered those questions to the IAEA satisfaction is, just an immediate goal to kind of bring Iran back into compliance with the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty. So I think that answering the nuclear questions is the main thing. Then, getting into, what is Iran able to do? Will it have domestic enrichment? What will be the level of monitoring and cooperation? It will have to be very extensive. So I think those are the immediate questions and issues that have to be addressed.
And when the IAEA looks into this question, what they're looking for is to the extent that uranium has been enriched, right? I mean, if it's 20%, that is for civilian purposes. If it goes up to, if it's somewhere between 20 and 100, it shows that there's an attempt to do something else with this material. And part of our concern is we don't know where they are in terms of the enrichment. And I'm asking this. We don't know where they are with their enrichment. And part of the concern is also getting from 0 to 20% is more of a challenge than going from 20% to 100% in terms of slowing that roll, if you will.
Right. I mean, well, first of all, we have a good idea, or at least the IAEA thinks it knows, because it does have monitoring equipment in Iran right now. That's something I think a lot of people don't understand, is that, Iran is open to inspections right now. The question is, how extensive are those inspections? And the concern is, are there facilities right now that the IAEA and others do not know about? So that's part of Iran answering those questions. So it's not, the main thing is not how much enriched uranium does Iran have, and to what, how heavily is it enriched. There's also questions of what experiments have they carried out with nuclear application or with weapons applications, such as triggering mechanisms. That's one of the main questions with the Parchin facility north of Tehran that people may have heard about. This facility, that there were concerns and some evidence, although it's not clear how strong the evidence was, that there were experiments carried out relating to the use and development of nuclear triggers that could be used in a nuclear weapon. That facility has been basically razed to the ground now without letting the IAEA take a look at it, which obviously does not instill confidence in people. But those are the kinds of questions that the IAEA is going to need answered.
And how do we know about facilities we don't know about? I mean, that's
right.
That's the problem, isn't it? I mean,
it's just, we got into a similar thing with Saddam. It's like, prove to us you don't have the weapons you don't have. But I think the IAEA, they're not going to completely ask Iran to prove a negative. It's just they have certain questions and they need those questions answered.
And so, just bring this out and tease this out for us. So they interview a range of people, and from those interviews and from the experiments that are conducted somewhere, they basically fit together what they know what a weapons program would look like, and they know what a civilian program would look like. And if there's some discrepancy within the civilian program, like, hey, that guy seems to be very interested in X or Y, or they seem to be, they've ordered one of those machines that weaponize things. That's a weird thing to buy. Is that basically what it is?
That's it. And you've also got, intelligence from various member groups. You've got intelligence from the United States. You've got intelligence from Israel that they can submit to the IAEA, and the IAEA will follow up with that in interviews and other investigations. And sometimes the line here between, what's weapons-related work and what's not is not exactly clear. I mean, under the NPT, it's not illegal to kind of run computer simulations about certain things that have a weapons application. Some have different applications to different things. So basically, the IAEA, just again, to repeat myself, I mean, there are certain very direct questions that they feel that Iran has kind of been dancing around and has not answered yet.
Now, the IAEA has this evidence that presumably comes from Western intelligence agencies and who knows where else. Do they ever show this evidence to the Iranians and say, like, here, take a look at this. How do you explain this?
They do to some extent, but I think they also. I mean, this is a concern that the Iranians have, and because they're not, they constantly challenge the provenance of such evidence. And it's not without foundation. I think the initial revelation of Iran's nuclear weapons related work in 2002 came via the MEK, the Mujahideen Ikhalq, which is an Iranian anti-regime terrorist group. So Iran does have some grounds to raise suspicions about evidence when it comes from sources like that. But yeah, I mean, the problem here is that Iran has a pattern of behavior keeping these activities secret that really do raise, I think, legitimate questions about their claims that their program is entirely peaceful.
And so, what do you think the chances are of a meeting between Obama and Rouhani? And to the extent that there is one, how much will we hear about it?
If there is a meeting between Obama and Rouhani, I don't know how likely that is. If there is one, it will be basically a meeting in the hallway and a handshake. So I think there will be. I don't think there is anyone who imagines that they'll actually, go into a room and sit around a table and talk. Although certainly don't want to rule that out. I mean, that might be too much too fast. We got to find out if Iran is really into us. What we're going to see is Kerry sitting down with the foreign minister, Zarif. I think that in itself is a huge step. Mm-hmm. I don't think Iranian and U.S., the highest level, the Secretary of State and the Iranian foreign minister have met. I can't even remember the last time that happened. But I saw a report just a few hours ago that that's in the works right now. So, yeah, small steps, but they are positive steps.
Okay, and I've alluded to John McCain weeping this week in jest, but he probably is, right? I mean, how is this being received? Like, what do they do now? I mean, I'm quite convinced that for the neocons, China is sort of always looming in terms of,
right.
We've got our boogeyman in the back pocket, and this is the one that
right.
we're really worried about. But Iran has been sort of their go-to boogeyman since basically the day after shock and awe.
Right. Well, I think Iran, was one of the ones they went to. I mean, you brought up China, and I think that's great because I think if you remember the early, spring and summer of 2001, and you remember like the Hainan Island incident. I mean, China was it. I mean, they were gearing up for China, and then all of a sudden 9/11 happened, and they hit pause on China, and all of a sudden it was Islamic extremism.
I spoke in 2004 to Gary Hart, who was one of the co-chairs of a commission called like the 21st Century Potential Enemies of the United States Commission, that basically had provided just literally weeks, I think, before the 9/11 attack that Al-Qaeda was the problem. But he said to me that they met on the first day, and there was about 20 people around a table. They went to every single person. Who is your biggest concern, or what is the biggest concern that you think the United States has from a security standpoint? Almost to a person, they all said some variation of Al-Qaeda, except for one person who said China, China, China. That person was Lynn Cheney. And apparently, she didn't come back for the second meeting, according to Gary Hart. And so this is, are we going to see? I mean, are we going to see something like this from the neocons, where there's some squawking about Iran, but if things go the way that people hope, that they'll have to pivot at one point back to China? I mean, is it, or do we have a couple of years where they can still bomb Iran?
Well, no, I think they always sort of keep the pots on simmer, whether it's Russia or China, so they can heat those things up whenever it's politically advantageous for them. But I think the immediate concern here is, you're already seeing noises from very hardline, members of Congress and outside groups making these wild demands, for anything, the very minimum that the United States can accept, whether it's, no domestic enrichment for Iran, which I think is just a complete non-starter and shows a total lack of seriousness about what an actual agreement would entail. So in the immediate term, I think people should keep an eye, understanding that Obama and Rouhani both have their own domestic hardliners that they have to deal with. I mean, I joked the other day, it's like there's almost an unwritten agreement between some of these hardliners in Iran and the U.S. and elsewhere that, they're going to try and tear down any opportunity for rapprochement when it arises, and that's what we're seeing right now.
So what I guess that basically it's just a countdown until John McCain and Lindsey Graham demand that Khamenei cut his beard for any type of agreement or something to that effect.
Right, exactly. He needs to wear an Uncle Sam American flag style top hat and cut his beard and pledge allegiance to the flag.
And do an
So I think the challenge.
anti-Obamacare ad too, maybe while ahead.
That's right. Yeah, so I think the challenge right now is pushing back on some of these people who are trying to raise the bar to just completely unrealistic levels.
Well, it's going to be fascinating to see how this plays out, and if this meeting between Kerry and Zarif takes place, this is going to be a major breakthrough. And Matt, I appreciate you coming on and previewing its potential for us.
Great, always happy to be here.
Matt Duss, folks.